In this video we want to talk about high performance working, sometimes known as HPW. The concept of high performance working and high performance culture is central to an organization and its employees. We'll see what it means in a moment, but this is an important concept, one which relates to productivity and quality and consumer satisfaction. And if we put all of that together, it really leads to sustainability in the market. High performance working plays a key role in maximizing productivity and increasing competitive advantage. So it's important that we understand high performance working as a way of increasing productivity and increasing sustainability, as I said, in the marketplace, to ensure the survival of the organization, particularly at a time of rapid technological or some sort of market change, technological change or market change, something which is causing upheaval in the marketplace. High performance working can lead to competitive advantage, which means the competitors go out of business first. There are two key terms which distinguish high performance working. High performance working practices, HPWP, high performance working practices, and also high performance working organizations, HPWO. So two concepts relate to high performance working: working practices and working organizations. High performance working practices first. These are work practices introduced within an organization to improve employee efficiency. So in terms of a broad stroke approach here, high performance working practices is simply ways in which the organization tries to improve employee efficiency. High performance working organizations are organizations which implement these working practices. So the two concepts are related, clearly. High performance working practices are initiatives within high performance working organizations. So the organization is committed to high performance, and the organization will have work practices to enable it to generate high performance working. These types of organizations are perceived as efficient and able to effectively implement practices to gain competitive advantage. So it's important that the organization is identified as a high performance work organization. It's identified in the sense by its employees and by those who deal with it, the external stakeholders. Because in identifying it, it enables the organization to live out its ambitions to implement high performance working practices. So the working practices are the detailed initiatives within the organization which make it efficient. And an organization that details these working practices is a high performance work organization. So let's talk about high performance work practices. According to the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, in 2017, the definition of high performance work practices is a set of complementary work practices covering three broad categories: high employee involvement practices, human resource practices, and reward and commitment practices. So we have three complementary work practices that sit within this idea of high performance work practices. High employee involvement practices, so the employees are very keen to be involved and to be engaged within the organization. High performance human resource practices, so the human resource element in terms of training, development, utilization of the human resource effectively and properly, and also within the environment which is conducive to work, good human resource practices, and finally reward and commitment practices, that the employees are adequately rewarded and that their commitment is recognized and rewarded. So we have three components here to high performance work practices. These three categories are referred to as bundles of practices and cover 35 work practices, which I'm not going to go into all 35 of them, but the way in which these can be itemized and configured within the, let's say, the high employee involvement practices, we could identify various points there. Human resource practices, we can devise various points there, and when we add it up, we could generate a total of 35 work practices under this schema. But as I said, we're not going to get that heavily involved here. Implementing these practices aim to improve organizational performance and are in line with objectives and strategies. So the high performance work practices lead to the achievement of broader objectives and strategies as set out by the organization. If the organization wishes to gain competitive advantage, wishes to, let's say, expand into a new market or develop a new product line or whatever it is, then it must have commitment. It must take the workforce with it. It must have the involvement and the collaboration and the enthusiasm of the workforce. Otherwise, the whole exercise will be half-hearted and may not be successful. These practices provide employees with greater control and decision-making over their work activities. When employees feel that they are recognized for their contribution, but they also feel that they have some latitude in determining the way in which to work and their involvement, they are encouraged to show initiative. In other words, be involved, show initiative, and develop their own working practices, their own processes. Then they will be more involved, and the chances are there will be greater efficiency and more learning by doing, more understanding the tasks and passing it on from one operator to the next, and greater involvement. So it leads to more profitability and greater sustainability of the organization, and hence, of course, more employment and sustainable employment. The benefits of these practices will result in increased motivation, leadership, communication and teamwork. So if there are high performance work practices that are conducive to more involvement, more commitment on the part of the operators and the employees, there tends to be more motivation, they're more interested, and leadership can emerge as well. So some operators who previously were not identified as leaders may emerge. They're the ones who are solving the problems and ensuring that the section is running smoothly and there is a through flow which is in accordance with the plans. But also there will be good communications and good teamwork. People are working together more effectively. Now, high employee involvement practices, the aim is to improve levels of trust and communication between employees and employers. So getting more trust and more communications between the two sides, the employers on the one side and the employees on the other, leads to better communications, better teamwork, more productivity, more involvement, more engagement, and it's to the advantage of each side to cooperate in this manner. It's achieved through greater involvement in the organisation. The employees are encouraged to be involved in the organisation. Their opinions are sought, actively sought. It could be in terms of focus groups or discussion groups. Perhaps they're invited to submit forms or feedback, or they're involved and they feel involved, and as a consequence they become more productive, more interested. Providing sufficient information about the company aims, mission, strategy and goals. It's important that the employees know what the organisation is planning. Where is the organisation going? What's it attempting to do? What are its plans? What's its mission? What's its strategy? How is it going to outwit the other producers who are making similar products? How is it going to enter new markets and develop new products? What are its goals? Where does it want to be in 5 years or 7 years' time? And the provision of that information to the employees will generate some sort of certainty in their minds, more commitment. Secondly, restructure of work activities to make them challenging and motivating for employees. Job widening, job improvement in terms of the roles that are asked of the employee are important. So the employee has the opportunity to show initiative. The employee is not doing a routine task over and over. There's more involvement on the part of the employee because the job is varied. Job enrichment is important. It's not just a question of performing small tasks repetitively. That could be seen as soul destroying and will not lead to commitment or engagement with the organisation. But if the job is wider, has a range of activities, there is more engagement on the part of the employee. They will feel more involved. Now the practices, well, the practices include communicating organisation performance and strategy. It's important, as I said earlier, that the organisation communicates this and lets the employee know what the organisation is thinking, where it wants to be, how it's going about it, what the problems are, what are the issues, and so on. What are the constraints? Put the cards on the table, look at everything and make sure the employee understands the situation. And develop employee awareness by providing business plans and targets. So the employee feels involved, they feel consulted, they feel a part of the organisation. They know what the organisation is trying to do, they know what the obstacles and the problems are, and they become more involved. Perhaps have a staff association so that members of the staff can meet and discuss issues. And that could be even widened to include line staff and all the members of the company. It could be similar to a works council, where each department or each section will elect someone to attend meetings and feed back to them what happened at the meetings, what the organisation is thinking, what they're doing, what are the problems, what issues are they confronting, where do they want to be. So that there is a channel of communications back to all the staff in all the various departments. It's important to find out what exactly the staff are thinking and what their views are. So having some sort of surveys or some sort of activities where their opinions are sought. Again, they will feel involved, they will feel empathy with the organisation. They The surveys may not be perhaps written surveys, forms to fill out. It could be interviews, or it could be uh, very simple, straightforward, not intimidating situations, but perhaps inviting certain numbers of staff on rotating it all over the staff, but inviting members of staff to attend a lunchtime meeting once a week perhaps, where lunch is provided and they just get to talk about what the issues are today and what are the problems and how they're going to be solved and what the management can do. There's a feedback. They could have suggestion schemes. Sometimes companies just put aside a box and ask people to, if they've got a suggestion which is productive and constructive, make the suggestion, and if it can be implemented, perhaps it's something worth looking at. Quality circles and total quality management. Quality circles are seen as a particularly good idea, where members of staff at all levels can meet, again perhaps once a week for perhaps an hour, and just chat about what issues the organisation is facing, look at possible solutions, try out different suggestions, and in the following week talk about how it went, what happened, what went right, what went wrong, what could be done to improve the situation. So they're trying to look for improvements over a longer period of time. Kaizen is a system of looking at ways in which jobs can be progressed, and raw materials can be requisitioned from the stores, and when the job is in progress there's an indication on the cards as to where the job has got to, and it's just a way of disseminating information so that at any one time people are able to look at the chart and say where jobs have got to in terms of the production system. It could be working in teams, and job rotation is an answer to motivation. It could be employees are, instead of working individually, they're asked to work in small teams and collaborate and deal with issues as they come up. Or it could be they're simply moved from one job to the next so as to refresh them, to ensure that they have got good motivation. They are refreshed by moving on, getting new experiences, and eventually coming back to the tasks they were doing before. So, human resource practices. Well, the purpose of this practice is to focus on human capital investment and skill development. Organizations may look at the employees as an investment. That they are holders of skills, holders of competencies and abilities that the organization require. So the organization has a vested interest in developing those skills and competencies. So the organization is investing in its personnel in the same way as you may invest in a machine. So it's investing in skill development, investing in competencies and abilities, and it's viewing the employees as human capital. And to that end, it's in the organization's interest to not only enrich working practices and create greater motivation for the employees, but to develop the employees as well in terms of the employees' abilities. But of course, in order to do this, the employees must want it. They must be motivated to want this to happen. Employee development is key for human resource, as this improves quality of work and services for customers, and increased levels of productivity and innovation. So having a more cognitive, a more engaged workforce not only leads to better quality output for the customers, which should result in more sales in the future and greater sustainability of the organization, but it should also lead to greater productivity, reduction in costs in other words, and innovation, where the employees are able to make suggestions to modify the product or modify the working practices to become more productive. The HR function is now more of a business partner working to meet the strategic objectives of the organization. So the human resource function is one in where the human resource section is looking at the workforce as a way of developing the workforce to make it more productive, more innovative, more engaged. And it does this through the provision of training, perhaps continuous professional development programs, having more training in terms of not just production related issues, but training in terms of working practices, health and safety, the support mechanisms that the organization should put into place for its employees to ensure not just their safety but their involvement in the organization. This is where the employees spend a large part of their lives, and there is a social part to working that should be facilitated as well. The following are some HR practices that may be employed. Performance appraisals, where perhaps a manager will speak to employees on a monthly or a 6-monthly basis and see how they are performing and what they need to be more effective. This may be a one-to-one meeting with the employee, or between the employee and the manager, and some record of the discussions and some items as to what should be achieved over the next 6 months, and how the employee hopes to develop and what would help the employee to develop. And this record is kept so that in the subsequent meetings the management is able to refer back to it and see what has been achieved, what's been met, and if it's not been met, then why not, what additional support is required, what issues stopped it from being developed. And so performance appraisals are a way in which human resources may monitor development. Feedback on job performance. It could be the case that the employees are asked to feedback on the job performance, feedback what they feel about the tasks they've been given, how they feel about the working environment, about the pressures on them to meet particular targets, and so get some feedback and see what can be done to improve productivity and performance, and facilitate at the same time the suggestions and requirements of the personnel affected. Assessment approaches, looking at tools for recruitment, for example. Look at how performance can be assessed. It should not be too intrusive or too intimidating. It may be by observation or just general report backs, and perhaps a feeling as to how it's moving and changing, how the approaches to work are evolving, and how productivity is changing. But also feeding the requirements of the various tasks into future recruitment literature, so that the right personnel may be recruited with the right attitudes and sentiments towards the job and towards lifelong training. Look at the employee training needs in total, in terms of skills, competencies, abilities, technical skills, human skills, communications, written skills, reporting skills. Look at all of these and see what can be done to improve them. Look at continuous professional development. Programs of continuous professional development may be set up where employees are invited to attend for training once a month or once a week or once every couple of months, whatever it is. And the program of professional development is targeted at some key skill development or some issue that's been identified as important within the workplace. So setting up a program of continuous professional development under the auspices of a director of education or a program manager, someone who is responsible for delivering this and monitoring its effectiveness. Work structure to improve efficiencies. Look at the way the work is currently set out and see what can be done to change it so as to improve efficiencies. It may be just the sequence of tasks, that the way they're laid out is not efficient. Or it could be that some change to the capital or to the equipment or to the physical environment is required in order to facilitate efficiencies. Mentoring and monitoring. Mentoring is where a member of staff is trained by a more experienced member of staff. Perhaps someone who's been in the organisation for a long time will mentor somebody who is new, will answer any questions, will instruct the person how to perform certain functions, and will also monitor the person to ensure that person is developing in line with expectations. Quality assurance, ISO 9000 and other schemes, try to get validation for the organization's work in terms of developing people and developing systems for developing people. So that the organization is working to a standard and they have guidelines within which to assess their own success or failure. And ensuring that there is workforce diversity, that the workforce is mixed in the sense of not just race but age, qualifications, backgrounds. So there's a variety of personnel which will make the workforce more interesting, a nicer place to be, but also will enable some people to have different aptitudes to work in one area, others to work in a different area, so that there is greater movement and greater flexibility within the workforce. Now, reward and commitment. These practices are in place to develop employee commitment towards the organisation. So the whole idea of the various schemes we've talked about is to get more commitment on the part of the employee, to try and facilitate the employee's requirements in terms of working practices, job enrichment, involvement, so that the employee can empathize with the organization and what the organization is trying to do. So the reward system and the commitment should be in line with supporting these practices. Financial rewards such as profit sharing and performance-related pay provide assurance and a sense of stakeholding within the organization. If the employees can share in the profits, they have more incentive to be involved. They see it as their organization and they will work for the organization more fully than if they see themselves as a mere employee. Other forms of employee commitment include non-financial rewards, which create a long-term relationship with the organization. Non-financial rewards could be status, it could be the provision of perks within the workplace, perhaps an office which is nicely decorated and set out. Again, it signifies it's a statement of status, a title within the organization. All sorts of non-financial rewards may be made which will encourage the organization to be involved with the employee and for the employee to reciprocate, but there's nothing financial between them. It's simply a title. It often happens, for example, at universities, that someone on a particular pay scale may be awarded a title, become a professor or something of that nature, and they'll become much more interested in the organization because they've now got a title. Their salary is essentially the same. They've got a title, so they're more engaged with the organization. The following are some practices that relate to reward and commitment. Performance-related pay. If people are working hard, producing well, are committed, interested, their pay may be changed to reflect this. The more they work, the more they produce, the more committed they are, the higher they're paid. Could be profit-sharing schemes, as I said earlier, that at the end of the year when the company reports its profits, a certain proportion of the profits are set aside for the employees and are shared out in the form of bonuses. Could be flexible working practices. Sometimes organizations may not start at 9 o'clock in the morning and work finish at 5, but start sometime between 8 and 10. This will now allow families, for example, to take their children to school and still not be late for work. So it's flexible working approach. They're able to finish at different times, or they're able to work more flexibly. And sometimes organizations are able to do this, and that would lead to more commitment. Admittedly, some organizations can't do it because the work may be highly sequential and the machines are running, and if someone is late, the whole system has to stop because there's no continuity within that sequential system. But if it's possible, flexible working practice may lead to more commitment. Job rotation, moving somebody around between jobs. It refreshes the person, it gives them more interest. They're learning something new, they're going about something in a different way, it's a different task, it's not boring. It engenders a commitment because they are now interested. They're doing a different job to before, and eventually they'll be rotated again onto yet another job. So they're getting new experiences and they're more engaged as a consequence. Non-financial rewards. Sometimes organizations take the employees on holidays and may set aside some days in the year for trips to the seaside or whatever it is. They may give them gifts, promotions, give them health schemes or extra pension awards. So some are bordering on financial, admittedly, the pension and so on. They've all got financial implications, but they're non-financial in terms of they don't get paid at the end of the month. So it could be gifts, promotions of one type or another, annual lunch or whatever it is, annual dinner at some hotel, whatever it is. They could have family-friendly policies. For example, the one I just mentioned, where they have flexibility in starting work in the morning because it enables family members to take their children to school or pick up their children from school in the afternoon. It's family-friendly, and that would lead to greater commitment on the part of the employees. So these are some of the issues involved in high performance working, and that's all we're going to deal with in this video. So the source we used was that one, and that's it. Let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.